Hi guys. This week's video is about, it's a little bit of a contrasting video. It's how do you come up with ideas? Once you've been writing for a while, a lot of ideas will just come to you. You'll see things, you'll see opportunities, you'll see opportunities to tell stories in everything. But a lot of people struggle with that. Like, how do you come up with an idea for a film? How do you come up with an idea for a movie? There's a few techniques I like to use, but I have been writing long enough now that I see ideas, or I hear conversations, or I see scenarios, and I sort of realize that these would make a good story, or a certain little aspect of it will make a very, very good story. But I'm going to take you through some structures and take you through some ways of thinking. And at the end of that, hopefully you'll be able to leverage some of these stories or some of these concepts to develop ideas that can become stories. These are ways of thinking. Okay, to start with, there is three types of stories. Man versus nature, man versus man, man versus himself. And when I say man, it can be a robot, it can be a woman. It shows the sort of era I grew up in, mankind rather than personhood. Sorry, try not to be that person. So it's your character versus the universe they're in, the nature, their external forces, the environment. That could be a political environment, could be a forest. It could be a person versus another person. The actual sentient opposing forces. So that's person versus person, character versus character. This is your classical protagonist, antagonist. And then you've got a person versus themselves. This is the internal struggle. The what are we going to do? How are we going to get over this? Can I better myself? They're struggling with making decisions. They're struggling, and sometimes you can interlock these. I had a little story, and feel free to write this because I probably never will. I kicked it around for a little while, called My Friend Pete. There's a man called Peter. He finds hasn't got a great deal of length of time to live. So he decides to take the road trips he's always wanted, which is one of your classical bucket list type films. His daughter's a bit resentful about it. Like, she wants to spend time with him. She wants him to go and have more treatment. He's not keen on having more treatment. He just, as my mother said, when she found out she was terminally ill, she said to the doctor, is there anything we can do to cure it? And he said no. She goes, well, let's do that then. Let's not do anything. She was keen not to prolong her life with more pain, but to get the process over and done with, which was my mum. That was Patricia. That's how she liked to live. And he's like this. Peter is a bit like my mum. He's like, there's nothing we can do to stop this. Rather than spend my time, shooting bows and arrows against lightning, I'm going to use the good quality component I've got to do the one thing I've wanted to do. So he goes on a road trip. While traveling, he meets a homeless man who's also called Peter. And he helps that Peter reconcile with his estranged daughter. So it's the contrast where he's sort of walking away from a good relationship to do what he wants to do, because he doesn't have that relationship with his daughter, and she's desperate to try to have that relationship. She wants to reconcile now that he's dying. Instead, he's going to help another man reconcile, because that reconciliation will go a bit longer. So this is Peter versus Peter. This is an internal struggle. This is person versus person, and that's an idea. That's those basic forms of ideas. Neil Gaiman, a big fan of Neil Gaiman. Love how he thinks, love how he writes. I watched his masterclass, which is worth the cost of masterclass by itself. And he says the way he develops ideas is to get two things that he knows and smash them together, and then ask questions of them, or go outside the norms. He said, what happens if a werewolf bites a wolf? So that's the start of the idea. So at midnight, does the wolf gain human-like qualities? What about if a werewolf bites a chair And then he goes on to describe, while you're sitting in the chair and you're thinking about the werewolf, and the full moon comes up and you're locked inside the house to keep yourself safe, and suddenly the chair you're sitting on sprouts hairs. So get two things you already know and push them together. Then there is the other technique, which is the what if. You look at a scenario, look at something that already exists, and you change its inciting incident, or you change something about it. This leads to so many stories. The big one is Man in the High Castle for me. I've watched that recently on Prime. What if America and the Allies lost World War II? What would the world look like? And there's the start of the idea, that single thing, a what if. What ifs also give you alternative futures. Like what if vampires weren't bad? What about if, they were some good vampires? That will give you the Twilight type ideas, where they're sparkly vampires. They're not your good hard vampires. I'm just reading my post-it notes, as I said last time. The other thing you can do too is this is a standard business idea. Actually, it's not so much for story generation; it's for all-up idea generation. Is you write down every single thing you know about a topic. So I heard Phil McKinney, yeah, I think that was his name, talk about generating business ideas. And he said he did an airline. He said you write down every single thing they knew about an airline at the time. He was helping them generate these ideas. Write down every single thing they knew about the airline. Yeah, they're cheap. They supply food and entertainment. They're safe. They fly on time. They have good schedules, good routes. They can go anywhere. All the things about the airlines. And then on the whiteboard, on the opposite, they wrote the opposite of what that is. So it's cheap, no, it's expensive. They give food and drink, no food and drink. They have good schedules, no schedules. They have, you can go anywhere in the world, limited locations. And they went through, they rubbed out everything they knew, and they looked at the list of opposites and looked for opportunities. And that was the birth of the budget airline. If we don't give them food, we don't give them drink, we don't give them movies, we fly to limited locations, we can be incredibly cheap. And that gives us the advantage, because if the traditional airlines then want to take services away to come down with price, they're going to be seen as bad. But if we've never had it to start with, people will come to us specifically for that. So this is like Qantas is my national carrier in Australia. Good airlines, never had an accident that's killed anybody or injured anybody. But they're a little bit expensive for that reason. Very well maintained planes, very, very rigid in its processes. So it started a budget airline called Jetstar. You can't fly cheap on Qantas, but you can fly cheap on Jetstar. And Jetstar gives you nothing. You take off, they come around with an FPOS machine with the trolley. Want a packet of peanuts? Scan, hit your card for everything. I'll fly interstate to go see my son because it's only an hour flight, up, down, who cares? I can sit without food or coffee for an hour. But that's their job, is to be that thing, to be the cheap thing by finding the opposites. So you do the same thing with a story. So what do you know about a bank robbery? Well, it's a bank, large amounts of money. There'll be criminals, there'll be customers, there'll be a hostage situation, the police will come, there'll be a standoff, all that sort of stuff. Start putting the opposites. Okay, there's a bank. Okay, there's no bank. There's a standoff. No standoff. There's money. Well, no money. The police turn up. The police don't turn up. And then you can begin to see something maybe like Reservoir Dogs coming from that. We don't see the bank. We don't see the heist. We see the setup for the heist. We see the fallout of the heist. We don't see the heist. We don't see the bank. We don't see any money. We don't see the standoff. We don't see the police. We see a dozen guys in black suits. So you take what you know, look at the opposite, and then find an opportunity down those opposites. The other thing you can do is look at what is stopping a person from making a decision or making a change in their life. So this is a little bit of force field analysis at a bigger level, not just finding the small elements within a story. This is generating an idea. So I have a story about a homicide detective who's gay, and it's in the 50s. So he can't come out because it was probably even a criminal offence in some countries to be gay in the 50s. And he's investigating someone. He's investigating a hate crime. So he's investigating his community. And everyone around him is going to have disdain for that community because that was the masculine, over-the-top culture that would have been in the police in the 50s towards gay people in the community as a whole. So he has to do his job. He has to work for the betterment of his community, but he can't do an entire job, so he's conflicted. Does he come out, which ends his career, probably stops him from being able to solve the crime within his own community? Does he, what does he do? These are all constraints around him. And then you've got the extra complexity of the crime and the investigation. And do the people in the community out him? Does the criminal who's been targeting this community know who he is and target him? These are all the ideas that can start coming in from looking at a single thing that stops a person from doing something. Does the thing that stops the person from doing something, is that enough conflict for a story? Is there an idea in that by itself? If we look at the Israeli television show, The Judge, I think it's called Your Honor in America. It's called Your Honor in Israel too. The Israeli one is very, very good. If you get to see it, watch it. Where he passes judgment on people all the time, day in, day out. He tries to be good. He tries to be fair and honest. And down the line, he doesn't choose between Palestinian and Israeli, even though he's an Israeli himself. When the people come in front of him, you see him settling the score. He's just straight by the law. What it says, right is right, wrong is wrong, done. And then his son kills someone with a car, comes home. His reaction is to start with is to say, okay, look, we have to go to the police. You'll be in trouble. The law's the law. You'll do a little bit of time in prison. You've killed someone. You have to face the consequences. You'll have to be protected. You can't be a judge's son in prison. It'll be very bad for you. But I can get you through this. I know how to navigate the system. The law is the law. And when he turns up, he finds that the person he killed was the son of a criminal and was a violent criminal himself. Now he's got this grey area. We've forced him to make it, or he's making a decision that he can't make. Does he value the criminal more than he values his son? So we're challenging one of his central premises, and we're forcing him, the thing that constrains him was that strict knowledge of the law and abiding by it. Now we're pushing against that, the same way as that investigating hate crimes against this guy's community is pushing against him, making him maybe out himself or do something, and there's extra pressures. So you've got these extra pressures coming in, which turns the standard police story into something more interesting. This turns a standard judge story or a standard law and order courtroom drama into something a little bit more. So I hope these ways of formulating ideas are never fully formed. They're seeds. You put them into the ground, you start throwing things at them, like the way you water a seed and give it nutrients and it grows into a plant. This is a way that you put the seed of an idea and you let it grow. And then you start seeing, well, is there a man versus a person versus nature, a person versus person, a person versus self? Where can we explore those? How do they move it around? Can we compare two things? Let's write down everything we know about that scenario or about that genre and start putting the opposites in. So if we apply the opposites to this person versus self story and start putting things against that, but you'll begin to see things. And it doesn't have to be in a genre. It doesn't have to be a particular way. I've got another a thing I found interesting. At the end of the American Civil War was the start of the Old West, because you had a lot of these soldiers and America needed to expand, it needed farming, it needed to recover it. So people could go west and take land and the government would grant it to them. So you've got that fine line. So I did some research and found that there was war criminals out of the American Civil War. So what happens if those war criminals are now hiding in the West? Because we always have stories set in the West about evil cattle barons and oil and people taking other people's farms and how lawless it was. But if you look at the West as a hangover from the American Civil War, it opens up more things. You've got the leftover Confederacy and the feeling about slavery. How does that impose itself now into a town in the South? So it's not all gunfights and westerns. You can now look at it as in a reconstructionist story, a bit like any other reconstructionist story in a post-war environment. These are ways of developing ideas. And you'll get to a point where ideas just pop in and they bounce off your head and you're chasing ideas away. But when you're really trying to come up with something that you know you want to write, I would normally start with a theme and have a question and say, can a person do this while being one of these? So that's one way of posing a theme. You know the question you want to answer, but what idea are you going to use to answer that question? These are some little tools and ways of thinking that will hopefully help you generate ideas. I know it's been a little bit rambly today, but as always, if you'd be so kind to leave a comment. If you've got some ways of coming up with ideas, I'd love to have them below. Share them with people that come to the channel. Share them with your other writers. This is a river that lifts all boats. So share your knowledge with others. Everyone grows for that. It's the best way to actually concrete your own ideas, is to try to teach others. It's a very, very good way of consolidating your own knowledge. Comment, share this video if you could. If you've got longer questions or you want to have a chat, nick over to griffithscreative.com.au. There's a contact form, but there's blogs, there's more videos, there's books, there's things. There's a lot of free resources over there for writers. So griffithscreative.com.au. Comment, share. I also like to call out every now and then scriptrevolution.com. If you're a spec writer like we are, go over there and host at scriptrevolution.com. It's free. If you want to give them a donation, drop a bit of money on Patreon, that's all good. CJ would love that. Good, honest people. There's a forum over there. Chat with other writers, and it's safe and it's secure, and it's someplace you can point people when they say to you, have a copy of your script. Point them to your Script Revolution page. There's synopsises over there. They can see a poster for your script. They can download your script. You're told when they downloaded it. It's a very, very good service. Okay, guys, till next time, keep writing.